Hello my crafty friends, this is Monica from Allsewpetite. In this tutorial I will demonstrate how to make the Easter egg pouch. This is a free pattern that is available on my website, and the pattern includes 3 different sizes. As you can see, there is a small, medium and large size. There is a top zipper closure and the main compartment is fully lined. This project is perfect if you want to use up your scraps or fabrics, or if you want to practice sewing zippers and curved seams. I will include the link to the pattern and all supplies I use in this tutorial in the description box below. If you like to learn how to make the Easter egg pouch, then keep on watching. To complete today's project, you will need external fabric and lining fabric. Because this project is meant to be a scrap buster, as you can see on this sample here, I prepared some scraps of fabric which I'm going to stitch together to make up the front and the back of my pouch. However, if you don't want the external pieces to be made of the scraps of fabric, you can find a piece of fabric that is large enough so you can cut it from a single piece of fabric. So it is really up to you. This way the project will be much easier and quicker to do. I stitched my pieces in a very random way, so there was no specific way that I would do. And you can find a lot of different tutorials on YouTube to show you how to stitch random pieces together. For my lining, I'm using quilting cotton, but if you want, you can use also a waterproof fabric. If, like me, you're using quilting cotton or very lightweight fabrics, then I would advise fusing a woven interfacing to the back of the fabric first. And if you are making a patchwork from your scraps of fabric, you might want to use a piece of batting or fleece to stabilize your fabric. If you are using more heavyweight fabric, such as for leather, cork, or maybe a cotton canvas, you probably don't need any further stabilizers, so bear that in mind. You also need number 5 zipper. The length of the zipper will depend on the size of the pouch that you are making, so double check the sewing instructions to find out the right size. And if, like me, you are using a continuous zipper, you might want to have a lighter on hand just to burn the edges so they won't fray while you work. You'll need some marking tools. A seam ripper is always good to have on hand in case if something goes wrong. A ruler to take some measurements, snips, scissors, some pins and clips to hold your fabric in place. You might need a hand needle and a thread to close the opening in the lining, and I like to have a nail on hand to help me guide the fabric underneath the machine. What I like to do is to take my pattern piece and a batting or a fleece and cut 2 pieces that are larger than the pattern. So I would just cut around. So you should have 2 pieces for the front and back, and then 1 longer piece that is longer and wider than your gusset. Now I'm going to take all my scraps and I'm going to stitch them in random pattern on top of the batting. Once you've got all those 3 pieces ready, you're going to take your pattern piece and trace the shape of the Easter egg pouch on both the front and back. Then we can cut them out. So you should have 2 pieces from external fabric for the front and back, and then 2 pieces for the front and back from your lining fabric as well. And also cut 1 piece for your gusset from external and lining fabrics. To start, you're going to take your external gusset and number 5 zipper, and we're going to place the zipper facing down on top of the right side of your gusset. So you're going to line up those shorter edges and you can clip them together. Then you can bring the other end and pin it along that other side, just like that. And if you want, you can take this to the machine now and baste on both sides about 5 millimeters from the edge. You're going to take your lining piece and with right side facing down, place the gusset on top of the zipper Again, you're going to line up those short edges and clip them together. And now we're going to stitch both seams using 1 centimeter seam allowance. Next, you're going to place those two gussets wrong sides together, so flip them away from the zipper, just like that. You can line them up, so line up those raw edges. You can clip them as well if you want. Then you're going to take this to the machine and we're going to baste the longer edges about 2 millimeters from the edge, and then you can top stitch along those two finished seams. When you have this ready, you're going to line up the seams, and you can mark midpoints on each side. So you can either use a marking pen and just draw a line, or use the scissors to just cut a little snippets. Here we go, just like that. Then what I like to do is to take my scissors and snip the gusset and the zipper all around. So I'm going to make little notches around the entire gusset on both sides. This way it will be easier for me to line up the gusset around the front and back panels. So make a small snippet just like that, about 5 millimeters from each other, and don't make them longer than 2-3 millimeters. Now you're going to take your external front piece and we're going to line up the gusset right side facing down on top of the front piece. So the seam allowance should line up with the notch on each side, just like that, and your midpoints should line up on the top and the bottom. Make sure you position your zipper so it opens the way that you prefer. We're going to clip that with right side facing each other. Now we're going to take this to the machine and we're going to sew the seam around the entire panel using 7 millimeter seam allowance. Once you've got that ready, you're going to take your lining front piece and with right side facing down, you're going to place the lining on top. Again, you're going to line up all 4 notches and clip around the entire panel. So make sure you keep the gusset out of the way because we're sandwiching the gusset, the zipper between both pieces. When you're ready, you're going to take this to the machine and we're going to sew the seam again using 7 millimeter seam allowance. However, we need to leave an opening somewhere around so we can turn the pouch right side out. So I like to just take my pen and make a little notches on side, big enough so I know I can turn my pouch right side out. If you prefer, you might want to stitch from this side and follow the previous stitching line as a guide, because previously we used 7 millimeter seam allowance and now we have to use the same seam allowance, so it might be easier to just follow along the previous stitching line. So in that case, make sure you mark your notches on this side. Once you've got that stitched, you can use your pinking shears to trim the seam allowance by half. Otherwise, use your regular scissors and cut a little triangles around the entire pouch. This will ensure that the pouch and the seam lays nice and flat. I have the triangles cut around the entire seam. When you are ready, however, you're going to turn the pouch right side out using that opening. If you want, you can take this to the pressing station and just press the seam flat. However, I like to do it after I close the opening. So roll the lining by 7 millimeters because that's the seam allowance. Put the folded edge just beyond that stitching line, and then you can pin that in place. Now, using a ladder stitch, you can close that opening by hand. After you close that opening, you're going to flip the panel over, bring the gusset to the top. Then you're going to take your external back piece and place it right side facing down. You're going to line up all 4 notches again on the other side of gusset and clip everything around. Here we go, just like that. Always make sure your zipper is open. Now you're going to take this to the machine, and again we're going to sew the seam using 7 millimeter seam allowance. After you stitched the seam, you're going to take your remaining back lining piece and again place it right side facing down. So the lining pieces are facing each other. And again, you're going to squash everything in the middle and line up that edge of your lining back piece with the edge you just stitched. So first, again, you can line up all 4 notches and then clip everything around. So this part might be a little bit tricky because you have the zipper and quite a lot of bulk in the middle, but just take your time, take it slowly, and you can definitely do it. So now take this to the machine, and again we're going to sew the seam using 7 millimeter seam allowance. Again, remember to leave an opening on one side so you can turn the pouch right side out. Okay, once you've got that stitched, again you're going to trim the seam allowance by half using pinking shears or cut those triangles like before. Now you can turn the pouch right side out, and then we're going to close that opening in the lining. After you close your opening, you can turn your pouch right side out. And give it a final press if you have to. If you like this tutorial, you have to check out my other video where I make a similar pouch with heart applique. See you next time. Stay crafty, friends.